Hi, my name is Mark Luvis, and I'm going to be helping the Rivera family out of their financial situation. The Rivera family has four members: Marco Rivera, a 35-year-old software developer who makes $95K a year; Jenna Rivera, who's 32, an administrative assistant who makes $50K; and their two children, Luna Rivera, their 8-year-old daughter, and Nico Rivera, who's 5 years old, their 5-year-old son. So there's some adjustments we can make to their budget to help them for now and for the future. The family makes decent money and there's some problems, so in order to find them, we have to figure out what their current budget looks like. And to do this, to start, we're going to look at some pre-tax calculations. So as you can see, it was accounted for on the left that their retirement plans were accounted for and their health insurance was accounted for. And you can kind of see what that looks like with their pre-tax monthly salary at the bottom. We have $7,441.66 for Marco and $3,833.33 for Jenna. So using that, we can figure out how much the family paid in taxes for each month. So on the right, we use the married filing jointly tax bracket to figure out how much they're going to pay. And then using that, on the left, we filed their taxes, and then we calculated their net monthly income combined, which turned out to be $9,618.99. The reason we combined the income was because the married filing jointly uses that. So using that, we can see where the family spent their money. As you can see on the right, we have money put aside for car payments and credit card and health insurance and homeowners insurance. A lot of the payments were calculated with the different formulas for car payments, and we can kind of use this to determine where the money was spent. We can turn these calculations into a formal budget on the left that the family can use to analyze and determine where they went wrong and where their problems come from. There are a couple of things we can notice about the budget. In the top right, there was $746 saved per month. And that's not really a lot if you think about it compared to how much they make each month. And they didn't budget for groceries. That $746 didn't account for grocery money. And with a family of four, that's still a lot of money that needs to be spent on groceries. And there's also a lot of state tax that they didn't take account for. And that would come out of an emergency fund that they don't have. So the family's in a lot of trouble. There's a lot of money that needs to be spent that they don't have because of the budget not allowing for anything. And there's a lot of adjustments that we need to make to improve their financial situation based on this analysis. So in order to look for the better, we have to start by looking at the strengths of the situation. They both have stable jobs that pay well. They both contribute their pre-tax money to retirement plans, which is really good. And they also have high credit scores, so if they were to take out a big loan, they could have good interest rates. They also have a good home that's appreciated over the years. And a good thing about not having enough money left over in your budget is that it limits how much wants you spend. So that's a good way to look at it if you're thinking about it that way. But of course, the reason they requested help was because there are some weaknesses of the situation. They both have a ton of debt, especially credit card, which can cripple them financially. And they also have a really long car payment, and they also have a lease. So they're struggling with their car loans. And then Marco has a lot of student debt, so that adds even more debt to the amount they already have. They're living paycheck to paycheck based on their budget, which allows them to contribute little to the future. And they're also spending a lot on unnecessary purchases, like $1,200 on dining each month, which is ridiculous. So how do we fix this situation? The solution is to cut back on spending, especially with all the debt. So as you can see on number 3, it talks about how debt needs to be paid off immediately. I think 1 and 3 go together. If money's cut back in the beginning, you can focus on debt and just pay it off right away so you're set up for the future. Because if you don't take care of debt, your situation is ruined. And number 2 talks about how there's planning for the future that could take place. There's a 401k plan and a Roth IRA that could be used more for the future. Marco and Jenna need to focus on the future so they can succeed later down the road. They need to have that vision that allows them to grow for the future. A few more recommendations. The family should create an emergency fund because in the past they've had troubles with money not being available to them because they didn't have anything saved and there was payments due right away. So having that emergency fund can give them some much needed security. We should also remove PMI from the mortgage because you already have a lot of equity in the house and it's just a useless payment at this point. So you can save $155 a month if you just call and then take care of that, and then it's a huge amount of money saved over time. Marco should also, when it comes to debt, pay the standard plan and then just focus on paying off the debt because there's no need for special budgeting over time when you can just get the debt out of the way immediately. When it comes to transportation, Marco should try to refinance and lock in a better interest rate. And Jessica, instead of leasing, she should try to purchase a new vehicle that's used. She shouldn't lease anymore. She should focus on buying and having an asset instead of having to pay over and over again for a lease that just runs out. And then also, they should contribute monthly payments to a used camper if they're going to buy a camper. And if there's money left over, they can have that want and they can splurge a little on a camper. So there's a couple products the family can use to help them save. A way to do this is using an S&P 500 index fund instead of a Roth, because the family mentioned how before they retire, the kids are going to want to go to college and they're going to need to save money for that. So the S&P is a more liquid option than a Roth, where the money won't be able to grow enough or they won't be able to touch it by the time the kids are ready for college. And then at the same time, they have a checkings account that they save money in. Instead, they should move it to the savings where it has a higher interest rate while you're figuring out what to do with the money. And then lastly, have that emergency fund so you have money left over just in case anything happens, so you have that extra security. The family doesn't realize this, but they have a lot of money they can save if they're focused on savings. So we think that a reasonable goal per child would be around $100K for their college tuition, just because of how expensive college is these days and how expensive it's going to be when their kids go to college. So we think a reasonable goal would be around $1,000 per month if we put it in the S&P. So it sounds like a lot, but the family has a lot of leftover money if savings are focused on the future. And then Marco also wants to max out his 401k because it's pre-tax money. If it's focused on, it's a great way to save for the future and reduce that taxable income. So the family has a bunch more they can use. They have a match plan through the 401k through their job, which is pre-tax. They also have an IRA already set up that's ready for money to be deposited into it. There's also daycare, which won't be a concern anymore because they have resources like public parks, public libraries. Some of these parks can also be used for family time too, so they won't have to use the restaurants for that family time they're craving. There's a couple things the family needs to focus on. They both don't seem to understand the danger of debt and how crippling it can be to their budget. They also don't seem to understand the importance of maintaining their good credit score because they seem to be not caring about credit card debt and paying off their credit cards. So if they're going to try to purchase a camper, the debt should be focused on so they're able to make those payments over time. They also don't seem to understand the danger that wants have on their budget. All these eating out moments, all these subscriptions, they're really harming their budget and not allowing them to spend on things they actually need. Alright, so we're doing their new and improved budget. As you can see, we're maxing out their 401k contribution. It's going to be $334 instead of $50. Because the 401k was pre-tax, taxes need to be calculated again, and now we have $9,681.47 for our new joint monthly income. So we have our new budget. A little bit of analysis. This budget was made after debt was paid off because we already talked about how there's going to be a month where they focus on paying off that debt because of how dangerous it was. We removed daycare because public libraries can be used. We also adjusted eating out to $150, which is much more reasonable per month. Streaming services, which they're going to cut back on, has been reduced to $18, which is much more reasonable than having every single streaming service pretty much on their budget. The 401k was maxed out, and Roth IRA contributions were made, so through this budget, they're automatically focusing on the future. We also have $70 per month to an emergency fund that will pile up quickly and help them have that extra bit of security. $150 was also saved per month because of having that call for removing the PMI. Just another fee that didn't need to be paid that we took care of and removed. So a lot of different fees through this budget were removed, and it's looking a lot better from what we see here. We used a couple calculations to figure out what it would be like for Jenna to go from leasing to purchasing her own car, and there's a ton of savings, almost $500. And the $20,000 camper payments are expensive, but using their budget, really analyzing it, and figuring out how to make those savings can allow them to afford it and allow them to splurge a little. We're allowed to pay the $20,000 camper payments over time. As you can see, we added some of this to the budget. The car payments are much cheaper, which is surprising because you'd think that leasing would be cheaper over time, but the payments are actually cheaper to own an asset, which is crazy. And then the camper payments were added to the budget because they were able to afford it. And then as well, college savings were added, which is huge because it's another way that the family can save for the future and benefit from it. So talked about a little how much the family saves with this new budget, but let's summarize it. So after all the payments, after everything's taken care of, the family has $928 left over compared to the old one, which gives $746. And summarizing everything, the new budget maxes out the 401k, invests for the future, saves a ton for college, allows for 2 owned vehicles, and even allows for that extra want, the camper, that's going to be paid off over time, and they're able to afford it with even more leftover money. So with the new budget, you end with more money and you start with more money, which is incredible. So in trying to calculate the net worth, we have to offset liabilities. We have a camper they just paid for and a Honda Civic, but since they're purchased now, the liabilities offset the asset values. We also have to calculate other things, such as the Bronco, which there's still a lot to pay off for, so that's going to contribute negatively to the net worth. We also have some money in savings and checkings, and there's a down payment on the house. The house contributes a lot. As you can see, there's still a lot of debt that needs to be paid off for the house, but it actually contributes positively to the net worth because of how much they've already contributed over time and how much it's appreciated. And we calculated all that right here using some formulas. And as you can see, the net worth for the family is listed below. As you can see, the family's negative $90,000 in debt as their net worth, but over time, if they stick to the new budget, they should succeed now and in the future. Thank you for my budget, and have a great day.